This program is brought to you by the Reeves Law Firm, www.reevesfirm.com.
In the know. Good evening, everyone. In the know. Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? This is a reality we simply have to accept. Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves. Let's go ahead and get started.
Welcome to another edition of Q&A Social Security Disability Today. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the Social Security forms in general. And what I'd like to say is stop stressing over Social Security forms. People, I'm going to probably say some things today that may stress you out, a few of you, or make a few of you upset. Please don't take this anymore as me trying to give some constructive criticism and feedback as you're dealing with the issue as it relates to the forms that you receive from Social Security. Let me tell you the one thing that I have totally gotten a true appreciation of over a decade-long time that I've practiced Social Security. People hate forms. I mean, really, you hate those forms. No one tells you this when you're applying for disability benefits, but you're going to get swamped with a crap load of forms. And let's be honest, when you're sitting here and you're out of work, you don't have any money, you're sick, you don't feel well, the fact that you are getting bombarded with these forms are really stressful. What makes it even worse is that it seems like you're getting the same thing over and over again. And so what happens is that as you start to realize that these forms are important to your claim, you start getting upset because you're not sure exactly what to put in these forms. Even worse is that the forms appears to be the same forms over and over again. So then you ask the big questions, why the hell do they need all these damn forms? One of the things that I want to do now is kind of deal with the myths that are out there and kind of bring in a reality check. Because a lot of times I've heard a lot of complaints over the years. And so one of the biggest things that I hear people is saying the government is trying to trick me. But the reality is the government needs your information. Meaning, when you're going to apply for disability benefits, the only way they're going to get this information is they get it from you. So they're not trying to, quote, trick you. In order for them to get an understanding of what specifically you're saying is your problems and your limitations, they need you to provide this information to them. I know this may seem like an oversimplification, but most people they say they don't know what the government wants them to say. Tell the truth. When you start the application process, you're basically telling them, not even basically, they're telling you that you assert and promise under oath to tell them the truth about your circumstances. So it's not that they're asking for you to give them some magical language or some language in a particular way. They want you to tell them the truth about your condition. So what happens is that they and be very specific about it. So it's not that they're asking for you to say things in a particular way, in a particular language, a particular slant. They want you to tell them the truth about your condition. Here's one of the biggest things people get upset about because they believe that Social Security is wasting their time by sending them all these forms. Here's the problem that most people fail to realize. In most states, depending on the circumstances, you have different sets of people looking at your case at different times for different reasons. So for those of you who are like, I'm a little confused. Well, when you file your initial application, you tell them, they send you this one form that says, it's what we call a 3441. It's adult function form where you basically tell them what's going on, from the last time you were denied. So let's talk about it from a appeal standpoint. You got your initial denial. You file a reconsideration appeal. So what they want to know is from the time of your last decision, what has changed? The form that they use to ask that information is the exact same one that may have been in the very early phases, but it's asking you very specific information, meaning what has changed. So now you get denied at the hearing level. You use that same form again to ask you, well, what has changed? People, even if nothing has changed, they are trying to see if there's consistency in information. Tell them. Don't get frustrated or upset. They're looking for consistency from the information you've provided to them. and different people are looking at it. So guess what? When you file your initial application and you get denied, whoever takes care of the appeal is different from the person who took your initial application. If you go to a hearing, your file is being transferred from the local Social Security office to the hearing office. So you literally, from the time you file, you may have one set, two sets, three different sets of people who are looking at your documents for the first time for different reasons. So they're not trying to waste your time again. They are looking at it for different times for different reasons. So keep that in the back of your mind. One of the hardest things that I have to tell people is when people say the government is just looking for reasons to deny my claim, I have to tell them all the time, here's the problem that you have to understand going into. The government is not in the business of finding you not disabled. You are in the business of finding yourself disabled. The reg says you have to prove it. If you don't prove it, then they're going to deny you. What happens is that people, when they get a denial, they treat it as if the government is going out of their way to deny their claim, as opposed to the flip side, which means you didn't have enough to prove you were disabled. So you have to go into it from a different mindset. Don't go into it into the mindset of thinking that you should have enough to figure out that I'm disabled because I know I'm disabled. You have to go into it thinking that everything they're asking me for is giving me the opportunity to prove that I'm disabled. So even if it's aggravating, even if it's the same form over and over again, even if it feels like you've answered the question 3 or 4 or 5 times, you have to prove you're disabled. So treat each opportunity as an opportunity to further demonstrate that you're disabled. And then sometimes I get this one a lot. The government knows that I can't fill out these forms. Actually, the government doesn't know that. That's not really their position to sit here and say, okay, we're not going to send the forms to this particular person because, they can't really fill out these forms. That's not the way the government works. Remember, you bear the burden of proving. So they can only use what information you provide them. So if you treat a form like, okay, well, I'm not going to fill it out because, they know I can't fill these forms out. Guess what? That means there's a lack of information that they have. Now, some of you are going to get frustrated because the reality is that there are some people out here who legitimately cannot fill out the forms, whether it be because of education level, because the forms are written on an 8th grade level, or maybe because the pain threshold that you're in is so bad that it hurts to do these, or maybe because doing things like this stresses you out. I get that. But the reality is that you can't hope that Social Security will figure that out, because the responsibility to prove you're disabled is really on you. And they can only use what information you provide them. Now, here's the hardest part of my presentation, is giving you some harsh truths from your perspective. The reality is you don't really want to fill out these forms. I got you. We there. You don't want to fill them out because they're a pain in the backside. And also, you believe your medical records should speak for themselves. But also, if you do have to fill out the forms, you only want to have to do them once and let Social Security look through the files for the form. And more importantly, you don't think that they need all these forms. Now, some of you are reading this going, okay, you're being condescending, Attorney Reeves. I'm like, no, actually, these are things that people have told me over the years. They don't want to do the forms. And I'm like, I got you. I understand that. Think about all the things that we have to do in life that requires us to fill out a form. You want to go buy a car. You got a couple $1,000s in your pocket. You don't want to go fill out a contract and so forth. You want to walk in, hand them the money, get your keys, and walk out the door. But the reality is that a lot of situations out there requires you to fill out some documentation. Also, a lot of times, I can't tell you the number of times people like, if they just look at my medical records, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. Most people don't have a clue what's in their medical records. It's only based on what the doctors have told them and what they perceive, not what they've actually seen. And when I say see, I mean everything. I mean every piece of medical documents out there. They haven't seen them in its entirety to have a true appreciation of what their doctors are saying about them. And more importantly, most people will read into what they think the medical paperwork actually says without looking at some of the little nuances here and there. And we've talked about this in other videos. Also, I've had people tell me, I can't tell you the number of times people fill out the forms and I'm like, okay, Social Security needs this form again. Well, why can't they just go back to the last one? And I want to jump up and down and scream and say, you're not in the position to dictate what the government does, right? So if they tell you we need this, give it to them. Don't give them any lip service. Don't give any back talk. Don't give any information about how they need to just use what they used before. Because guess what? If you filled out the form 6 months ago, and 6 months ago since the last 6 months ago, you've been to the hospital a couple of times, you've had some surgeries a couple of times, you've had changes in your medication, you've changed doctors. All that's information they need. So guess what? If they have to rely on what they used before and that's what they used to deny you, why would you want them to go back there when things have changed? You want to make sure, and even if nothing has changed, you want to make sure you show them that the reality is that your circumstances hasn't changed. And then I cannot tell you how many times people stop and say to themselves, they should be able to use it because they shouldn't need all these forms. Again, you have to prove you're disabled. It's not the government's having to prove that you're not disabled. So if they ask you for something and you don't provide it, you can't be mad if they make a decision based on what you didn't provide. I know this is going to sound really stank, but understand a few basic fundamental premises. Social Security doesn't see you every day. They don't know what goes on in your world. These forms are designed for you to really articulate what's going on in your world. You are the expert on what's going on in your life. So if you don't tell them, they won't know. They're really looking for consistency. Is basically what you're saying, which is going on with you physically and mentally, supported by the medical evidence on a consistent basis. Okay? The forms are written on an 8th grade level because they want to make it as easy as possible because they take in consideration the possibility that you may not have a representative, you may be doing this on your own. This is going to sound stank, but follow me when I say this. You've got to remember, someone who doesn't know you, never met you, never seen you, is going to be reviewing your medical records and your paperwork, and this is outside of maybe you going to see a Social Security judge. These people are going to be pulling all this information and looking at it from a blind standpoint. They're trying to create this picture of you based on the information that's provided to them to render an opinion about you. So if they don't have a complete picture, and trust me when I say, sometimes the doctor's records don't always give a complete picture, they have to fill in the blanks. The person who's in the best position to fill in the blanks is you. So if you don't fill in those blanks for them, you leave it to them to figure it out. And I've said this in other videos. You never want the government to figure out anything. Your responsibility is to prove. You don't want them to have to make a decision of whether they should give you the benefit of the doubt of one way or the other. You want to put them in a position where they can only give one particular outcome, hopefully in your favor. And remember, don't read anything into the forms. And that's where most people get stressed. They look at the forms. They read the questions. They've convinced themselves, because this is an important thing, and this is something that I tell people, I don't take it for granted. It's an important thing that you are doing there. You're applying for disability benefits. You're struggling. You need as much help as you possibly can. This is it for you. You got to have it. But when you're filling out the forms, they're asking fairly straightforward questions. Just answer the questions and just be clear. Remember, the person who's in the best position to speak about you is you. You are the best person to basically articulate what's going on in your world. So by all means, don't get too stressed out over this. The whole purpose of this video today was really to tell you, please, don't get stressed out over the forms. Just be consistent and just use this as an opportunity to further demonstrate that you're disabled.